Hello!
My uncles treated me as a servant, but when my parents' inheritance arrived, I made them regret all the things they did to me. My story may sound like something out of a book or a movie, but it is so sad that it's real. I always feel like my life is some sort of dark version of Harry Potter. When I was 2 years old, my parents died in a car accident. I don't understand all the details yet, but all I know is that it was sudden, and then one day, I woke up without them. They had no siblings or close relatives, except for my uncles. So I ended up living with them. For a 2-year-old, it is impossible to understand the dimension of such loss. I never knew my life would change so drastically, much less that the place that was supposed to be a safe haven would turn into a form of prison masquerading as home. Ever since I can remember, my uncles burdened me with feelings of being a problem that is bothersome to them. They never considered me as part of the family, quite noticeably. While the two children of my uncles, my cousins, grew up with privilege, love, and opportunities open to them, I was thrust backstage, or rather, into the informal servant role. My day went from cleaning to cooking and doing every other task no one desired to do. I never got to have a childhood. My aunt would often say, "I grew up without parents too, and no one felt sorry for me. You should be thankful you have a home at all, or we saved you from going to an orphanage." And every time they gave me leftovers, hand-me-down clothes that weren't even my cousins, they reminded me well enough that I couldn't expect more. It was as if everything they did for me had been a huge sacrifice I had to repay for the greater part of my life. And the worst of all, I grew up thinking they were right, that I did owe them something, that perhaps I just had to try more or even work harder for the place in this family. The harder I was trying, though, the never enough things for them went on. And now, here I am, about to turn 18. All my life, I had thought this was my life, that I would never have any other chance to get out of here. It so happens that my parents left a huge inheritance behind them. I only knew about it recently, for it was so stated in the will that I should not get it before becoming of age, while my uncles knew from the very beginning. I can hardly imagine how many nights they must have dreamt about this money, making plans as to how they would spend it. Now, with my birthday approaching, they've completely changed their attitude. Suddenly, the same uncles who called me a burden and belittled me every day are acting like I'm the most important person in the world. My aunt has started making me breakfast, which she never did in all these years. Even my uncle asks how I am doing, as if he really means it. It's so obvious that they want something that I could hardly hold from bursting into laughter. The most shameless part was when my aunt, with a completely serious face, asked me to return the favor somehow. She said I should give them a portion of the inheritance in compensation for the years they brought me up. Can you believe it? After treating me like garbage, now they want the money my parents left to secure my future. Honestly, I am angry, but at the same time I feel this is my chance. I cannot change what they did to me, but I can make them pay for it. And here I am, putting my plan together. I do not know whether everything will go according to my hope, but one thing is certain. I'm not giving up that inheritance. It is the only thing I have left from my parents, and I will not let them take it away from me. Who knows? Maybe this is finally my chance to get revenge for everything they put me through. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since I wrote, and man, things have escalated in ways that I never would have imagined. I took the advice of some of you and headed directly to the lawyer handling my parents' will. At first, I was really nervous talking to a lawyer. Dealing with all that formality and complicated legal language is not something I am used to. But I knew it was necessary. And man, was it worth it. Upon arrival at the lawyer's office, I met an older man, very kind and patient. He explained everything to me carefully and showed me documents I didn't even know existed. There was a breakdown of properties, investments, and money my parents had left for me. Turns out, they didn't just think about securing my future but did so with an amazing degree of detail. There is a house on the outskirts of the city, savings accounts, bonds, stocks, and even a small collection of art. Altogether, we are talking about an amount that took my breath away. It's enough money to secure a comfortable life for me and finance any project or dream I might have. He explained that, according to the will, everything had been kept in a trust until I reached the age of 18. My uncles knew this from the very beginning because they had to sign documents when they took legal responsibility for me. Of course, they never told me anything. What the lawyer did explain to me was that, beyond this, there was a specific amount apportioned for my living expenses, an annual amount for the furtherance of my needs. Food, clothes, education, and recreational activities. As you and I both know, I never saw a single cent of that money. For years, I wore hand-me-downs, often repaired, and ate leftovers of whatever my uncles were having for dinner. I never got new toys, let alone experience things like vacation or extracurricular activities. All that money was mine and was wasted by my uncles. And the same suspicion has been raised by the lawyer. Now, here's where things get interesting. The other day, when I was at school, my uncles rummaged through my stuff. Yes, they are that intrusive. They found some of the documents the lawyer had given me, which I had left in my room, naively. From then on, the gloves were completely off. Their first reaction was, as always, anger. My aunt confronted me, accusing me of being dishonest for not telling her about the money. According to her, a family doesn't keep secrets. I laughed in her face, because seriously, they hid this from me my entire life, and now they have the nerve to play the honesty card? Then my uncle came in, using his usual authoritative tone, saying that all the money my parents left was thanks to the family, so it rightfully belonged to them, or at least that's what my uncle claimed. Then he said something I'll never forget. If it weren't for us, you wouldn't have made it this far. We kept you alive. We sacrificed for you. You owe us. Instead of getting into a fight, I decided to take a different approach. I told them I understood their concern, but that everything would be decided once I turned 18. It was like giving them a small glimmer of hope, just enough to calm them down. I'm not sure if I am a good actor or they are just so desperate they will believe anything, but they do not suspect as yet that I have radically different plans. Since they learned of the actual extent of the inheritance, their behavior has become even more extreme. My aunt now cooks me complicated dinners, whereas earlier she would hardly share a plate of scraps. My uncle has started asking about my grades in school, something he never gave a damn about. For the first time, my little cousin seemed to have hesitated. "I don't know if this is right," he mumbled, after my father had forced me to skip dinner again. He's family too. It's so fake that I can hardly refrain from bursting into laughter in their faces. The most shameless moment was overhearing the conversation last night. They were now in the kitchen, thinking I was in my room, discussing how they should convince me. My aunt suggested appealing to my sense of family. My uncle interjected that if that wasn't enough, they could lay a guilt trip on me with everything they have spent on me. My oldest cousin weighed in, making the profound revelation that he could help by informing me that sometimes I never even belonged. What they don't know is that I've been writing everything down. Every comment, every attempt at manipulation. My lawyer said that documenting everything could be useful later, especially if they tried something more aggressive, like forcing me to sign something. For now, I'm playing along, letting them believe they have control. But in my mind, I'm counting the days until my birthday. Once I turn 18, everything will be mine, and they won't have a clue what's coming. This time, I won't be their victim. Update 2. Every day, something else comes to light that leaves me shocked. It's not just about my uncles trying to dupe me over the inheritance. Now everything makes sense, as from the very beginning they saw me like a tool for solving their problems. It's like all the jigsaw pieces are coming together, and the resulting picture couldn't be more disturbing. It all started a few days ago when I decided to go through the old boxes my uncles kept stored in the attic. My intentions were not serious at first. I was just trying to find a picture or something that connected me with my parents. All my life, they had told me there was nothing of mine left, but for some reason, I felt like I needed to check for myself. What I found wasn't just a confirmation of my suspicions. It was an eye-opener to some truth that I had never wanted to admit. My uncles have been stealing from me since the day they took me in. Among the boxes, I found some documents that should never have been there. The first thing to catch my attention was a bank statement from the monthly fund my parents had left for my living expenses. As I said, I already knew it from the lawyer, but it looks very different on paper. For years, my uncles had been receiving substantial amounts for covering my needs. I'm talking about enough for me to have a good life where I would get new clothes every now and then, eat well, even go on some extracurricular activities or on school trips. What did they do with that money? Absolutely nothing for me. All I ever got were leftovers, hand-me-downs, and a thin mattress in the back of a storage room. While they remodeled the kitchen, bought new furniture, and took my cousins on nice trips to such places as Disney and Cancun. I found receipts and bills that showed everything I had been suspecting. For instance, while I walked to school in torn shoes, they were spending hundreds of dollars on designer brands for my cousins. But the most gut-wrenching part? When I turned 10 years old, my paternal grandparents sent me a birthday check. I never saw it. Instead, my aunt cashed it and used the money to buy a brand new television. The worst discovery of all? The letters. Then in another box, a bundle of yellowed envelopes was lying in my name. They were sent by my grandparents living in a different country. All the letters said how much they wanted to see me and wanted to visit them, but never the cousins told me anything about them. In fact, I grew up believing my grandparents didn't want anything to do with me, because that's what my uncles told me. And the worst part? They didn't just ignore the letters. Among the documents, I found a reply letter my aunt had written back to them. She actually told them that they needn't bother visiting me, because I was doing fine and didn't need the stress of meeting strangers. Strangers. That's how they referred to my grandparents. The only people in the world who, aside from my parents, gave a damn about me. After reading those letters and going through all the documents, I just sat there on the attic floor in silence. I felt a mix of rage, sadness, and something close to helplessness. But I refused to let it break me. I knew I could use all of this to my advantage. Immediately, I took photos of everything. My attorney had already been apprised of what I found, and he assured me that this only serves to strengthen my case. Not only is it now crystal clear that they embezzled money earmarked for me, but they also intentionally isolated me from any form of emotional support. Since these discoveries, I have started noticing how erratic my uncle's behavior has become. I think they are finally realizing things aren't going the way they planned. Nowadays, my aunt is calling and crying all the time, telling me that she doesn't want to lose the family. As for my uncle, he's getting even more aggressive. At least give credit where it is due. You could mention how much you owed us after everything we have done for you. My cousins? They keep being overly friendly in an obvious, insincere attempt since their parents instructed them to do so. So, for the moment, I will keep my distances. Everything I find, I document. Everything they say, I write down. Every attempt at manipulation is being recorded. I feel like I'm building an arsenal, just waiting for the perfect moment to use it. My birthday is getting closer, and with each passing day, they are one day closer to not being able to keep this act up any longer. They could have been different, but at the same time, that's exactly what keeps me going. I can't change the past, but I can make them pay for everything they did to me. Update 3. It has been a few weeks since I updated last, and finally, things are reaching a critical point. Since then, I have been planning every move carefully because I know I cannot afford to make a mistake. After all, my uncles have shown they will do whatever it takes, even lie, manipulate, and control anything that they can to keep what doesn't belong to them. But now I have something they never expected: proof and knowledge. First, I let them continue their little act. My aunt kept making meals I'd never seen before in this house. My uncle started including me in family conversations, as if I had suddenly become part of the clan. It was almost funny to watch them struggle so hard with knowing what was in my hands. But I let them feel that this actually had a purpose. I went as far as even saying out loud to thank them for all they'd done for me. All to see their faces light up with satisfaction. And then there is the fact that the more confident they get, the more open to attack they would become. Then, one evening after dinner, my aunt took me aside for a serious talk. She looked at me with feigned concern in her eyes and told me that she and my uncle had been thinking a lot about my future. According to her, they were the only ones who truly knew what I needed in life. And that's why, for the good of everyone, I should give them most of the inheritance. "We're not asking for everything," she said, her voice almost plaintive. "Just enough to compensate for the years of sacrifice we gave to you. You're young, you don't need that much money now. We can manage it better and make sure you don't squander it." That was when I knew. I couldn't wait any longer. I pulled out my discreetly kept phone inside my pocket and used it to expose the recording between her and me. In just seconds, the contours on her face transformed from pride to absolute surprise. "What is that?" she panted. "That's evidence of what you've been up to," I firmly stated as steadfastly as I could get my voice to go. "That is not the only thing that I do possess." That same night, I decided to give them an ultimatum. I showed them the photos of the documents I found in the attic, the receipts, my grandparents' letters, the proof of how they had spent the money meant for me. I explained that I had already shared everything with my lawyer, and that if they kept trying to manipulate me, I'd have no problem taking this to the authorities. The panic in their eyes was almost satisfactory. My uncle, who always had been the most authoritative and self-assured, now began to sweat and mumbling excuses, whereas my aunt, on the other hand, burst into tears, saying over and over again that she did it for the family. That was their excuse, and their attempts at justification sounded pathetic. For the first time in my life I felt the power, but that was not all that night held. Before retiring to my room, I made one thing crystal clear. No longer would they be in control of the narrative. I let them know that I knew precisely how much the inheritance was worth and wasn't about to give up 1 cent. What they had to do if they wanted to get back into my good books, which actually was only said to keep them at bay, was stop all the manipulative mechanisms and finally learn to act their age. Next morning, the house was quiet. No grand breakfast. No forced talks. It was as if my ultimatum had sucked them dry of the energy to keep up the charade. But I knew this wasn't over. At this point, it went without saying that they weren't going to let go that easily. My next move? Reaching out to my grandparents. The very people my uncles had spent my whole life trying to keep away from me. It was a tough conversation, because they had no idea what had really happened. But when I told them the truth and sent them pictures of the letters they had written to me, they couldn't hold back their tears. They said for years they were trying to contact me and had thought of going to court. My uncles finally managed to get them to stop. Now, my grandparents are furious. And rightly so it was. They promised to do all they could for me and told me once I reached 18, they would help me take control over everything. They even invited me to move in with them if I wanted to get away from this house immediately. And although that was comforting to hear, I chose to stay a while. I wasn't leaving until I made sure my uncles paid for what they did. Since then, small changes have started to occur. My aunt at times tries talking with me, but now even her tone is fearful, not manipulative. My uncle can barely look me in the eyes. My cousins, probably not fully grasping the gravity of what was going on, kept their distance. In a few days it's going to be my birthday, and I will feel closer to justice. For now, I'm playing my role, keeping everything looking as normal as possible on the surface. But inside, I'm counting the days. When the time comes, my uncles won't have a clue what's about to hit them. Update 4. Yesterday was my birthday, and after years of enduring abuse, lies, and manipulation, I finally took matters into my hands. This was the day I had been waiting for ever since I found out about the inheritance. And I made sure that nothing and no one could ruin it. I won't lie, I was nervous. This wasn't just a step toward independence. It was the culmination of years of suffering, something I couldn't afford to ignore. The day started in the most surreal way possible. My uncles, who usually either forgot my birthdays or gave me some trinket just so they could say they did, actually tried to throw me a little party at home. They decorated the dining room with those cheap balloons and bought a store-bought cake, acting like they actually cared. Today, we celebrate how grateful we are to have you in our family. Grateful. That word was almost comical coming from them. I forced myself to smile, clap along with the cake cutting, and play along with their desperate attempts at resemblance to a happy family. I knew exactly why they did all that, and time was running out for them. Now that I was 18, the trust fund officially fell into my hands. What they didn't know, though, was that my real birthday gift was already in motion. I was supposed to meet my attorney later that afternoon. It was at noon, but I had told my uncles that I would be going out with friends so that they would not suspect anything. As I went out, my aunt gave me a forced smile and said, "Keep in mind, you can always depend on us. We are family." I came into the lawyer's office filled with more determination than ever. He had everything ready, the papers needed to officially transfer control of all assets into my name, along with a detailed breakdown of what signing those papers would mean. It was an indescribable feeling. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had real power in my hands. But this wasn't about taking control. I also wanted my uncles to answer for what they had done. The lawyer explained that while they had spent money which was legally mine, proving that they had done so illegally might be tricky. However, the letters, the receipts, and the documented abuse over the years were more than enough to back up my case. We concluded the best course of action was to issue a legal ultimatum on them: return the stolen money or deal with a formal lawsuit. After that meeting, I felt relieved because a load had been lifted off my back. But the most intense moment of my day still awaited me, my uncles. The confrontation. Afternoon of that day, I came home pretending it was just like any other day. My aunt was in the kitchen, and my uncle sat in front of the TV. They were so unwound, probably thought their manipulation still worked. I sat down on the couch in front of them and said, "We need to talk." No time was wasted. Today I turned 18, and I just took control of my parents' inheritance. Dead silence fell inside the room. My uncle stared at me, disbelieving his ears. My aunt, on the other hand, tried to feign excitement. "That's great, sweetheart. We knew this day would come, and we're so proud of you." I let her talk. I wanted them to think just for a moment that everything was fine. Then I pulled out a copy of the ultimatum my lawyer had prepared and laid it on the table in front of them. "This is what's going to happen from now on." I laid everything out. I had proof of how they had misused the money meant for my living expenses. I explained to them in detail what they bought with the money inappropriately and referred to my grandparents' letters, which they kept from me. Then I made it crystal clear that, if they didn't return the money after a reasonable time, my attorney would file an actual lawsuit. My aunt immediately burst into tears, telling me that she could not believe I was doing this, that everything they did was out of love. My uncle was furious. He yelled that I was ungrateful, that they had given me everything, and that I had no right to treat them this way after all their sacrifices. I stood my ground. I told them they could no longer control or manipulate me. I reminded them that I had legal backing, and if they tried anything, they would only make things worse for themselves. The best part? My cousin's reaction. My aunt had by now begun to cry and my uncle was screaming, when my oldest cousin stepped forward. "I just can't keep quiet anymore." His voice shook. "I saw what you did. You stole his money, you lied to him. I don't want to be like you." My aunt gasped. My uncle clenched his fists, but the damage was done. I think for the first time, they realized that something was seriously wrong with their so-called perfect family. Having said what I wanted to, I rose and told them that I was thinking of moving in with my grandparents. I made it clear I no longer depended on them, and from this moment forward, things were going to be very different. I left that house without looking back, feeling a sense of freedom I had never felt. That night, I slept over at a friend's place, just to create some distance between us as I figured out my next move. My lawyer had already sent them the formal ultimatum, and now I was just waiting for their response. I wasn't really expecting them to take it lying down, but to be frank, I didn't care. I was ready for whatever came next, because finally, I was in control of my life. Final update. 1 month later, it was now time to admit to myself that at last justice had finally prevailed. It has been 1 month since my birthday, and now I can say with absolute satisfaction that I have finally gotten the justice I longed for. I have not only taken back my life, but also let everyone see my uncles for the rotten people they were, ruining that perfect picture they struggled to portray as an ideal family. It has been a whirlwind of emotions this last month, but every single step led me to this moment. They wanted to ruin me, but in the end, I was the one who tore down their facade. Things started to spiral downward for them immediately after the legal ultimatum. At first, they tried to ignore it, pretending it wasn't a serious issue. My uncle, as arrogant as ever, told me, "You have nothing. If you were really going to sue us, you would have done it already." My aunt, in turn, resorted to appealing to my compassion, pleading that I reconsider. "Do you want your cousins to suffer because of this? It would hurt them more than it will us." But I wasn't about to back down. I let my lawyer continue with the case. A few days later, they received a formal court summons, and that's when everything started to fall apart for them. Their first big mistake? My uncle's financial secrets. I soon learned my uncle had a much darker financial history than I had ever imagined. It turned out that he had used part of my trust fund money to cover personal debts, including late mortgage payments and credit card bills. This was not only morally disgusting, but it also happened to be utterly illegal. My lawyer made sure this became a key part of the lawsuit, and the resulting legal consequences just left them shaking. What about my aunt? Her victim act fell apart the instant my lawyer presented evidence that she had hidden my grandparents' letters. That alone, while not as financially damaging as my uncle's fraud, painted an even clearer picture of intentional manipulation and isolation for emotional reasons. Not as injurious as the financial fraud, but my aunt's behavior was a real pattern of emotional manipulation and deliberate isolation. To me, that was every bit as unforgivable. Desperate attempts to escape consequences. My uncles did everything in their power to escape any consequences. First, they tried to countersue me. They said I was being unfair, that my claims were ungrateful. But their lawyer, who was no match for mine, of course, made it very clear they had no leg to stand on legally. Then they tried to settle with me in private, offering to give me some of the money they'd stolen if I would drop the case. Of course, I refused the deal outright. This wasn't about the money. This was about justice, about revenge, about everything they had done to me. The truth goes public. As the case moved forward, something unexpected happened. The community started to find out what was going on. My lawyer had filed all the necessary documents in court, and since this involved inheritance fraud, parts of the case became public record. Neighbors, friends, and acquaintances of my uncles started to realize they weren't the perfect family they pretended to be. The coup de grace, the arrival of my grandparents. In the time since I reunited with them, my grandparents had been my closest allies, and they were not going to sit around while all this was happening. So, they decided to do something. They came from abroad to attend one of the pretrial hearings in court. And then they did something which I will never forget. They confronted them face to face in the hall outside the courtroom. My grandmother is a small woman but very strong. She went up to my aunt and said, "You stole our grandson from us for 16 years. Now we're going to make sure you pay for every single day he suffered." My uncles had nothing to say. My aunt broke down in tears, while my uncle merely looked away. That was the moment I knew they had already lost. Not just the case, but any power they had ever held over me. The day of the settlement. Not having any defense against this in court, my uncles were left with no choice but to settle. They had to return a lion's share of the money they had embezzled. And to do that, they had to sell their house. Yes, they had to sell the very house where they treated me like a servant for years. Something so poetically powerful in watching them lose the place they valued so much. The same place where they humiliated me, belittled me, and made me feel like nothing. But that wasn't all. They also agreed to pay extra damages for the emotional distress they had caused. Something they never expected. Of course, no amount of money in this world could ever erase what I went through. But knowing that every cent they give me is a reminder of their defeat, that's good enough for me. The aftermath. After the settlement, their lives completely fell apart. Only to turn against them when word got around that they'd spent my trust fund money on themselves for fancy expenses. The friends that were praising their sacrifices, they cut them off. Even their children, my cousins, began to resent them for selling out the stability of our family. I hear they're living in a studio apartment now, and my uncle works extra hours just to keep his head above the water. And me? I went to live with my grandparents. They took me in with open arms, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in a home filled with love and respect. For the first time, I'm planning my future. Something I was never able to do while living under my uncle's control. Maybe I'll study, travel, or simply enjoy my newfound freedom. But the best part? I'm no longer afraid. They were the ones holding all the cards for so long. But now I know justice exists. Anything can be achieved by patience and determination. I'm done with my revenge. And they realized that every single thing they chose to do to bring me down was what exactly brought them to this place. To the brink of their destruction.
Bye-bye.